The rain tapped gently against the windows of the small family-owned diner on the corner of Main Street, the kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee and homemade pie clung to the air like a warm blanket. The dinner rush had settled, leaving behind a quiet hum of conversation, clinking silverware, and the occasional hiss from the kitchen. At one of the booths sat a man in his mid-30s, his shoulders broad but slightly hunched from the weight of a life that had demanded too much, too soon. His name was Daniel Hayes. To most people, he was just another face in the crowd, a single dad trying to make ends meet, his worn flannel shirt and calloused hands marking him as someone who worked with grit, not glamour. Across from him sat his 10-year-old daughter, Emma, her bright eyes wide with curiosity as she scribbled something in a small notebook she carried everywhere. "Dad," she whispered, pushing the notebook toward him, "look, I wrote another poem." Daniel smiled, the tired lines around his eyes softening. He read the short verses aloud, his deep voice low and steady. "The strongest trees grow in storms. The brightest stars shine in darkness. And the bravest hearts never walk away." He blinked, taken aback by the wisdom pouring from his little girl's pen. "That's beautiful, Em," he said, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "You're braver than I'll ever be." Before Emma could protest, before the peaceful moment could settle deeper into memory, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. The door swung open with a sharp creak, and two men stepped inside. Their clothes were soaked, their faces shadowed by the hoods of their jackets. At first, no one paid much attention, it was just the rain, after all, but something in their eyes told a different story. The taller one scanned the room, his gaze sharp, predatory. The shorter one moved with a twitchy energy, his fists clenching and unclenching as though he were holding back a storm of violence. They slid into a booth across from a woman sitting alone near the corner, a woman whose grace seemed almost out of place in the humble diner. She was dressed in a neatly pressed blazer, her posture tall and unshaken, though her eyes flickered with a quiet unease. At first, it looked like a coincidence. But within seconds, the taller man leaned in too close, his voice low but threatening. The woman tried to pull away, but the shorter man blocked her path. Chairs scraped as a few patrons shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene. The waitress froze behind the counter, her hand hovering near the phone. The air grew tense, heavy with the question nobody wanted to answer: should we step in? Daniel felt Emma's small hand slip into his. He looked down and saw fear in her eyes. Fear, but also trust. She believed he could fix this. He always did, somehow. He swallowed hard. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't a soldier, he was just a mechanic, a dad who worked long hours and sometimes skipped meals so Emma could eat. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The woman in the corner was in danger, and his daughter was watching. What lesson would he teach her if he stayed seated? With a steady breath, Daniel stood. His movements were calm, deliberate, as he crossed the diner. "Hey," he said evenly, placing himself between the woman and the men. "She doesn't want trouble. Why don't you back off?" The taller man sneered, pushing to his feet. "Mind your business." "This is my business," Daniel replied, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't scare her, not while I'm here." The shorter man lunged first, his fist swinging wildly. Daniel ducked, his instincts sharp from years of defending himself in rough neighborhoods growing up. He caught the man's arm, twisting it just enough to disarm the motion, and pushed him back against the table. The taller one came next, grabbing Daniel's collar, but Daniel planted his feet, driving him back with a force that sent a glass shattering to the floor. Gasps erupted from the diners. Emma stood on her seat, eyes wide, whispering, "Go, Dad, go," under her breath like a prayer. The struggle was messy but decisive. Daniel wasn't flashy, but he was efficient, protecting, not attacking. He pinned the shorter man to the ground, then turned just in time to block the taller man's strike. With a firm shove, he drove him against the wall, holding him there until the waitress mustered the courage to dial 911. By the time the police arrived, the attackers were subdued, grumbling in defeat as officers hauled them away. The diner buzzed with nervous relief, strangers patting Daniel on the back, murmuring gratitude. The woman he had defended stood slowly, brushing herself off. She looked at him with an expression that held both awe and curiosity. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't even know your name." "Daniel," he replied simply, catching his breath. "And this is Emma," Emma chimed in proudly, clutching his arm as though he were her superhero. The moment should have ended there, just another story of courage, of a man who stepped up when others stayed seated. But then, something unexpected happened. The restaurant owner, a gray-haired man named Mr. Thompson, approached with tears in his eyes. He studied Daniel closely, his lips trembling as though he recognized something in him. You're Daniel Hayes," he said at last. Daniel stiffened. The name wasn't secret, but what it carried was. "Yes, sir," he answered carefully. The room grew quiet, curious eyes turning toward them. Mr. Thompson's voice wavered as he spoke again. "This man," he gestured toward Daniel, "is the son of Captain Mark Hayes. The firefighter who lost his life pulling 3 children from a burning school 15 years ago." A hush swept through the diner. Emma looked up at her father, surprise flickering across her face. Daniel never talked much about his father. Mr. Thompson's eyes brimmed with emotion. "Your dad was a hero. And now, tonight, you showed us the same courage he lived by." Whispers filled the room, people nodding, some wiping away tears. Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't expected this. He never wanted recognition, he just wanted to live quietly, to raise his daughter with love. But Emma hugged him tightly, her voice breaking the silence. "I always knew, Dad. You're a hero, just like Grandpa." In that instant, Daniel's throat closed with emotion. He knelt to her level, pressing his forehead to hers. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a dad who loves you more than anything." The woman he had saved stepped closer, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Sometimes," she said softly, "loving someone enough to risk everything for them, that's the greatest kind of heroism." The word struck everyone in the room, settling deep in their hearts. The story wasn't about fights or danger, it was about courage born from love, the kind that didn't need medals or headlines. When the police had finished, when the crowd began to disperse, Daniel and Emma walked back into the rain. They had no umbrella, just each other. But Emma held her notebook close, whispering that she wanted to write a new poem, one about a dad who didn't just fix cars, but fixed hearts too. As they disappeared down the sidewalk, the people in the diner carried with them a truth they would never forget: sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never seek recognition, who carry their battles quietly, who love so fiercely that even strangers are safer in their presence. And somewhere above, beyond the storm clouds, maybe Captain Mark Hayes was smiling. Knowing his legacy lived on not through fame or monuments, but through the selfless love of a son raising his daughter to believe in bravery, kindness, and hope. Because in the end, it wasn't about a fight in a diner. It was about the reminder that in a world often clouded by fear and indifference, humanity's light shines brightest when ordinary people choose to be extraordinary for someone else.